Alrighty, good morning you heathens. Today we are going to be playing some City Skylines. My goal for this series is to go ahead and play until City Skylines 2 comes out. I'm going to build as best I can, as beautifully as I can, and grow as much as I can. Hopefully by the end of it I'm at Megaopolis before we get to City Skylines 2. So I guess that's a goal which should be fairly attainable. I might introduce more goals as we go along, but really I just wanted to play some City Skylines. I wanted to build something that looked beautiful, functioned well, and probably gave me some headaches before we were done, so that's exactly what we're gonna do. So, first things first, we're gonna create a new game. I have actually been looking at these over the past few days, trying to figure out which one I wanted to go with. And I think I'm gonna go with Cape Apple. I feel as though it played really nice the other day. I'm going to change the name to Port Crasmere. Back when I was playing D&D, I made this town called Crasmere, and it was a port town. So I'm gonna go ahead and click start, and then we will go from there. Alrighty, so real quick, as it stands, I am currently only using very limited mods to make time lapses or to have pretty cinematics happen, stuff like that. My initial goal was to try to stay unmodded for this series, just because it is paying homage to the fact that we are going into City Skylines 2. However, if we come across a situation where, let's say I come across something that gives me inspiration, or I see a part of my build where I really want to fine tweak something and that requires some sort of mod, maybe move it or more assets than just what the base game has, there might be a discussion to see if that was something that y'all wanted to do. Of course, if not, if you just want to see an unmodded playthrough, we can absolutely do that. And yeah, that was just my little spiel on mods versus non-mods. I think there's a place in City Skylines for both of them because it is such a customizable game. So, first things first, what I want to do is I want to take a look at what we have to work with. Anytime that you start a new map on City Skylines, it's always best to see what highlights are going on in the game. For instance, we do have two beaches right here. It may be worth keeping them as beaches, or if we find that one of them's in a bad spot, we might not use it. We have this big old rock formation right here, which we might want to design a park around. This is also a bit of a hill, it's a bit raised. I can show you all that later. We have this little old abandoned key system, it looks like. Maybe a water filtration thing going on here. Just anywhere along these beaches would make really high value places for housing and commercial in general. And then keeping my industrial not secluded, because it's not always the best practice, but keeping it in its own little area until I get to a point where I can use some different industrial specializations. My favorite by far is farming, and I did notice that we do have a few places around me that have some good farming. And so once we unlock those, I believe it's at 1600. Once we unlock that at 1600, we'll go ahead and play with those a little bit more. Maybe try to get some sort of farm history going on. Which leads me kind of into my next topic, which is going to be the concept of adding history to your builds, right? So this is very early game, I haven't even placed a road yet. But the best thing to do is to go in and know why you're putting something where it is. If you want to have more authentic, more realistic builds, knowing why you're putting something somewhere, or respecting build area and topography and historical landmarks and stuff like that, will always be the best way to add some sort of value or uniqueness to your builds. That's different than just, oh, let's put industrial over here, oh, let's put commercial over here, let's put residential over here. Because you can have beautiful road hierarchy, but you're going to have a more authentic feel to your build if you know why that road was put there in the first place. And so initially, my thoughts is that this highway is going to curve because the farming area to the right was probably already in place before the build-up that we're about to build today was where it's at. And so unfortunately, the history does kind of have to be out of order, just because it is the way that the game starts. You just have to get your setup initially, then you can get some way of making a good amount of income, and then you can proceed to building what you want, where you want, expanding the way that you want to. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get those basics set up, and I will come back to you whenever that's done. So yeah. Alrighty, so I went ahead and made the outline for my initial setup. Now, it isn't exactly perfect, nor is it random. I did actually play this map a few days ago, trying to kind of get a feel for it, see how I liked it. But this was about the extent of how far I've gone. I haven't really gone much farther than this. This is also a different setup for industrial than I did last time, but I feel pretty confident that this will work. It has a lot of decent connections and a little slippage road to get up into the residential part of it, and some decent levels of commercial. So, first things first, before I start the simulation, I am going to go ahead and go in and change our budget a little bit. If you didn't know, the best thing that you can do is actually turn these down to 50%. And then as you start having issues with electrical or with water production, you can go ahead and bump these back up, and it'll actually save you more money over the long run than it would to put down another power generator or put down another water pump. And so this is just a little trick to help you with your finances in the early game. There is one thing I am concerned about. I did run out of money when it came to piping, so I tried to kind of get a little bit of everything, and I'm also not connected to the water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this run for a little bit. Hopefully by the time that I get a little more money, I'll be able to go through and properly put down water pipes, but I'm going to go ahead and throw this into a bit of a time lapse, and then y'all can kind of watch it grow. Alright, so as you can tell, things did not go according to plan. There is no water because there's no money coming in. Since there's no money coming in, everyone's leaving. So my best bet now is to go ahead and get down negative enough where they give me that bailout, and then throw the water in. And once I do that and get the water pipes in, this will run just fine. Now, too many of those bailouts and you will be game over, but as it stands right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and let it run its course. I'm going to cut to when they give us the bankruptcy loan, and from there we will go ahead and hopefully get to a better place, because obviously this is very poorly planned on my part, but I'll be back. Alrighty, so there it is. It is a $50,000 bailout, so we're going to accept it, pause the game, and fix our water issue. I would have liked not to have had the bailout, but I got really ambitious with the designing. I might have bit off a little bit more than I was able to chew, just because I got so overzealous on the design part of it. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through and I'm going to add some water lines. Hopefully, now this is not my best waterline layout, but that's fine. Doesn't have to be perfect. Then we'll go here, this way, up, and right here, up, and that should be adequate coverage for everything. One last thing we do need to do is add a power line, just because this is outside of any power grid that we have right now. And hopefully, with a little bit more playtime, the water issue gets fixed. Oh, actually, we got Little Hamlet, which is our first milestone. It gives us access to a few different things. Loans, which we kind of already took out of bankruptcy loan, but we don't have to pay that back. It's sort of a bailout. Gives us access to taxes, which is how we're going to make most of our early game money. We have new services we have to consider: garbage, healthcare, and education. So what that gives us is the landfill site or the recycling center. I think initially we're going to go ahead and start with the landfill site, just because it is bulk, and early game it's nice. We can always transition to something a bit more green and healthy later down the line. You also have to get yourself a elementary school. You can also use the community school. It is an alternative if you have the green update. I can't quite remember what it's called. And you also have access to the medical clinic. It's what's going to keep your Sims essentially healthy. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and finish cleaning up the mess from the bankruptcy issue, our little water issue that happened. And we're going to go through and first let's get a landfill down. I think landfill right here will be just fine. Make sure it's not encroaching on any... oh, it kinda is. I might actually have to put it over here, which is not the best for that beach area, but I would rather have it a bit further away from my Sims, essentially, from the residential zoning. So I'm gonna go ahead and put garbage here. I'm going to grab the medical center, and then I want to put the medical center somewhere that's a bit more on, not necessarily on a main road, but sort of off of it, right? Because if I put it onto this road right here, what you're gonna have is you're gonna have Sims running up and down this road because it is sort of a collector. It acts as a collector. It branches between the two main roads, essentially. So what would happen is, as people drive up and down this, it would make it harder for the ambulances to get to different places. So you might consider actually putting it off of this road right here. I do want it a little more central, so I'm kind of thinking this might be a solid place for it. Gives solid access to the residential down here and the more crowded residential, which will eventually turn a bit more high-rise. I actually think that this would make more expensive builds, but we're still a bit too early game to be thinking that way, but it's always good to plan ahead. So I'm going to go ahead and put the hospital right here. Yeah, right there should be perfect for it. And then last thing we need is the elementary school. Now, normally I like to do schools as a school district, and the only real decent place I could put it is probably going to be down here. This is big enough for the elementary school and the high school. Now, it doesn't reach all the way into a little area. It might be worth considering taking over this square right here, making it into our school district, because there's a few small houses here which you normally wouldn't want to do a mulligan on, but for schools it's kind of important. So I do actually think I'm going to go through and unzone this and destroy the housing. It's not realistic, however, it's what needs to happen to have a school district. And I'm going to put the school right here. And then I'm going to put some roads right here. And then I'll put the high school right here. I didn't like how that deleted zoning. Oh, because... oh, whoops. Let me fix that real quick. My bad. Please don't despawn house. I'll add the green back to you. That should hopefully save that house. But now we have a... actually, I'll probably delete that road. Put the high school over here, and then I can make this into some little park. I think that's what I'm going to end up doing. And since it is something important to the city, it would definitely have actual roads going around it. So we're going to go ahead and upgrade these. Now this might not actually be a thoroughfare, but for the time being it will be. Now what we're going to do is, I have put in the school district area, I have my more expensive zoning area, I have the hospital right here, and I have my landfill right here. Now, as things go, this should grow a little bit longer, so I'm going to put us back into a little bit more of a time lapse. Ooh, no, wait. Before we start the time lapse, there is one thing I need to do. That is, I need to go in here, go to taxes, and if you didn't know, you can put these on 12% to make a little more income without breaking morale. And so you won't have your Sims complain as long as they have their basic needs, water, electricity, and you can make another 3% worth of income than what you were originally making. Now we do have access to loans. I'm not quite worried about loans right now. After that bailout, we are sitting kind of comfortably. I don't necessarily think that bailout means that we failed, because cities get bailouts all the time. I do think, however, we should consider refraining from that sort of thing later down the line, right? But for now, I'm going to go ahead and put us back onto a time lapse, and I will be back once things have developed a little bit more. Really quick, I am going to pause right here. As you can see, we are having a bit of an electrical issue. Normally that stems from the fact that we're not producing enough electricity. But if you remember earlier, I did talk about how we had lowered the budget on it. So anytime that you start seeing water or electrical issues, you can go through and increase this up, and then increase it up to 100, and then we go back to it. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the electricity to show you that now that we've increased that budget, the production comes back up. So the difference between 50% and 100% was 30 megawatts, which is more than enough to take care of this tiny little suburb, essentially, that we've got growing. So, like I said, we'll go back to the time lapse, and I will be right back. Alrighty, and with that, we have reached our second milestone. We did reach Worthy Village. It's when you reach 700 population. We do get access to some more things. We get access to a new area, which we'll go through, and I'll probably end up just buying it, but not necessarily using it yet. We get access to districts, policies, district specializations, and service policies. I probably won't get into those quite yet. The problem is that my little growth is still new. So I need to get stuff in place first before I start setting policies, and on top of that, I don't have access to all the policies. We do get access to our second loan. It's the medium loan. It comes out, I think, $60,000 if we need it. I'm going to refrain from that as well. We get access to emergency services, so fire department, police department, and unique buildings. We have some new industry specializations. We can put a district over our industrial and then turn it into a specific type of specialization, which I'm going to get into that more whenever we actually start building our farming district, because I'm going to put some industry into that, and I can show you what it means by that, essentially. We have a new residential specialization. It's called self-sufficient buildings. It consumes 30% less electricity, produces 30% less garbage, but also produces 30% less tax income. In the early game, tax income is quite important. You need money, so we're not going to put that on anything yet. We also have a commercial specialization called organic and local produce. It produces 50% of sold goods locally. Truck traffic in the area is reduced by 50%. It does increase electricity consumption, and it also reduces garbage production by 20%. There are some places where I might design that locally, or for more of an aesthetic reason. The truck traffic and the reduced garbage is actually quite nice. But again, we're going to hold off on policies until we get a bit more developed and have a bit more cushion for uncomfortable situations, right? So new policies as well, just in general. We can reduce power usage, reduce water usage, and have smoke detectors to make it reduce fires, essentially. It does cost 5 cents per building, so we won't get into that right now. And finally, we have the new buildings. We have our police station, we have our firehouse, and we have the high-capacity elementary school. Now again, I don't need a high-capacity elementary school. Our town is very small. When we get into our larger builds, our larger suburbs, then we can kind of build these to allow for more schools. If you know this game decently, you know that elementary schools are a bit of a problem, and this high-capacity elementary school actually helps with that by giving more capacity than the regular elementary schools, which is quite valuable. I just don't think it fits into the build that I'm building right now, but later down the line it definitely will. So with these new buildings, we do need to go ahead and pause. First things first is we're going to go and put a firehouse down. I like putting these closer to the industrial district, but they're also important to have a lot of connection here. I believe this is going to turn into a park, so I might actually put the fire services. It needs to have solid connections to pretty much everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put it right here. This road right here actually goes along the entirety of what we've built so far. So having it slightly off of that road will allow it quick access to most of the builds around. So I'm going to go ahead and put that facing towards one of the local roads rather than this makeshift collector that we've got going on. And then same thing with the police station. In fact, I might put the police station on the other side. Not always the best thing to have those two compete for traffic, but with that road being semi-tame right now, it won't hurt things as much. In unique buildings, one of the things that I do want to eventually put down is this countdown clock, as it is kind of the premise of the entire build, is to build our way to City Skylines 2. But for now, I haven't really planned out where I want to put it. If I do put a big old park right over here, it might be a good idea to put it here. I'm also thinking that this right up here, because of the fact that I haven't really zoned anything, this might be a decent place for it and have it sort of facing the highway as you come in, just for the sake of being the first thing that you see as you drive in, a giant countdown clock, which would honestly terrify me if I drove into a city and just saw a clock counting down to a few months away. I'd wonder A, why they built it, and B, why is it so close to being done? It was a big project. Anyways, one last thing, and then we can kind of build out a little bit more, is I want to go ahead and buy my next plot preemptively. I know that I want to get into farming, and the best way to do that would be to extend my highway this way and buy this plot, because this is where my farming industrial zone is going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and buy that. It's only 2,900. So there's that, and now I have both of my plots. Now I have access to go see what's over here, which is a very flat, semi-flat area for farming, and we will get into that whenever we grow a little bit more. For now, I do have about 2,700 or 27,000 to play with. You'll also notice that I've been using gravel roads for pretty much everything. Again, another way to save a little bit of money. Eventually, as we get a bit more stabilized, I am going to go through and put a little bit more down that looks better, because the gravel roads are not pretty. They're good for semi-basic aesthetics, but for what it is right now, it's not the best. Another little just key detail I want to put down real quick is this little road to get over to our water treatment plant. It would definitely be there. It would not be a priority, but it is there regardless, just to take care of it. Just to make it a bit more realistic, having something going towards your treatment plants, it's always an appropriate idea. Now, did I mess up with this? Yeah, kind of. What I'm gonna do, actually, is before anybody even considers getting sick, I'm actually gonna take out the zoning here and turn this into a bit more of a commercial zoning. Let's go ahead and move these housing. I don't want to deal with sick people right now, just because the area of effect for that does sink in over there. But for now, I think we caught it early enough that it's not a problem, and people can still live here without getting affected negatively. So we are going to go through and, in fact, I'm going to go ahead and upgrade this outside road, as I do believe it is important enough. It is sort of a, I don't really want to call it a boulevard, but it's kind of a boulevard. And let's go ahead and delete that. Well, that's not really what I wanted, but it's fine. We'll delete that road, and then we can always put it back in after the fact. So I'm just going to go through and upgrade these. I'll be right back. So one thing I am going to do, actually, is that main road that I have my police department and fire department on, I am going to actually go ahead and make that one a good road as well. I'm going to upgrade that road just because the fact that the police department and the fire department are going to prioritize that road over the gravel roads, meaning that it's a bit more streamlined about where they want to go. Now, other cars will prioritize it as well, semi-ignoring some of these other smaller streets, but we have enough connections to everything that it's not a problem. And eventually, we'll have this be a proper connector, essentially, to everything else. But for now, this is just fine. And with that, we are going to go ahead and plan out a little bit more. I will be right back. I'm going to take a look at what we've got going on. I do kind of want to put something... This might be something a little bit more entertainment district-esque. And then we could have this road come all the way down and meet up here, and then have this be some more residential. As you probably know, residential in this game is the highest demand. It is by far one of the hardest things to get set up, just because there's always people wanting to move into your town. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing a little bit of planning like this. Alright, so I now have this marked off the way that I want it. We'll go through with the gravel road again and make our little grids. If you notice, I did use two different grid patterns. I've used the square one up here. My argument is that this would have been the original growth of the city. Maybe where these keys are is where there was originally some sort of port, or there was possibly a port right here where goods and services would have came in and then would have developed around that. And as things grew, the highway came in, and as that happened, they needed faster expansion, faster growth. Maybe at the time, their mayor or whoever was in charge of building decided that they wanted to expand these grids to make them a bit more car friendly. Happens quite often. A good example of what I've designed here would actually be New Orleans. If you've ever been to New Orleans, or if you Google Maps it or look at it, you will see that it has, in the French quarters, where the trading and the bartering and stuff like that sort of originated in that city, you would see that it had these smaller districts and smaller blocks that everything else kind of grew around. And then it became very big, and it kept getting big, and eventually it became into a full-fledged city that took over way more space than it ever could have. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put some more blocks over here and get this area developed a little bit more too. I do intend on continuing this hugging the coast area. Not as tight as what happened here. I think that this is a bit extreme, just because, real quick, what it's done is it's gone through and actually added more here, which wouldn't have normally happened. And then there's this weird little dip that happens right here, which is kind of weird. But anyways, we can play with that a little bit more. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start building the blocks over here. So I will be right back once I've done that. Alrighty, so I have gone through and zoned all this. Now, I did have a bit of a goof moment. As you can see, I put my landfill here, and I'm looking at the area of sewage. It actually encroaches into this territory a lot more than I was hoping to, and makes the idea for this park a lot worse than I wanted it to be, which means that we are probably going to get a recycling center up sooner rather than later. And I'm feeling like the recycling center is going to go over here. That, or maybe over here. That's kind of where I'm leaning towards. But for now, I need to also go through and add these pipes. I like to turn off road guidelines for this, or I like to turn all the guidelines off for this. It makes the Makes the lines just connect a whole lot more smoothly, because then you can follow these curves without any issue. It's not perfect. I am kind of doing it a bit haphazardly, but I can go ahead and do that, and then you can follow the road, because that's how most pipelines are, is that most of them will follow your roads because it makes it easier to do repair on later down the line. Less easy for you to drive down said road, but I also want to go ahead and just add this. It's not necessary at all, but it makes me feel a little better. So let's go ahead and add this really quick, and I'm running out of money again, but at least I'm not in the negative like last time, which was quite unfortunate. So there we go. Now I do want to continue it down this way and down this way, but this will adequately cover my water for way longer than it's a bit more overkill than it actually has to be, but I want to go for a little sense of realism just as I build. So let's go ahead and speed it back up again, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut to when we've grown to our next milestone, and then we can kind of discuss future plans for the build, because I do need to get up to, I believe, 1600 population in order to get my forestry going on. But I believe the next milestone will give us access to parks, and I think I want to cover parks in a separate topic. So for now, I'm going to let this run, and I will cut back when we unlock our next milestone. Alrighty, with that we have unlocked Tiny Town. It is the final milestone that we are going to be getting today. Because of everything that we just unlocked, I would rather start this on the next episode, and I can go into actually designing the town. This episode was more so for building the baseline for everything else. So now that we have access to everything else, we can sort of play with this on the next episode. So, thank you for watching. I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye.